Hi, and welcome to Collaborative Solutions Ask the Expert. Today we're going to talk about how to take your Workday investment further to achieve maximum ROI. I'm Danielle White, Vice President of Global Customer Engagement, and I'll be your moderator today. We'll go ahead and go around and have everyone introduce themselves real quick. Let's start with Mary Ellen.
Hello there, my name is Mary Ellen Kennemer. I am a strategy resource working in our post-production or CVS services. I have been in the Workday ecosystem for about 10 years, the last 8 with Collaborative, and I'm happy to join you today to talk about tenant assessments.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. Shannon?
Hi, I'm Shannon Hansen. I'm a senior manager in our CVS portfolio group. I've been with Collaborative about 8 years now and in the ecosystem 10. I've been working with post-production clients for the last 4.5 years and have been through several tenant assessments. So excited to talk to you today.
Excellent. Caitlin?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Caitlin Gowdy. I'm a senior engagement manager within our CVS practice. I've been with Collaborative for the last 2 years, and I've managed multiple tenant assessment projects. So I look forward to having this discussion today.
Alex?
Hey everybody, my name is Alex Tay. I work in our organizational change and training practice at Collaborative. Similar to Mary Ellen, I've been in the Workday ecosystem for around 10 years and the last 7 of that at Collaborative. Looking forward to talking to everybody today about tenant assessments and our change management offerings around user adoption and reinforcement.
And Madeline?
Hi, Madeline Countess. I'm a director here in the HCM practice. I have also been with Collaborative about 8 years and in the ecosystem 10 years. I've done a number of tenant assessments, and I'm also part of our leadership team internally, helping to evolve and develop this offering as we see customer trends emerging. So looking forward to talking to you about this and hearing more from you about what you might like to see as we move forward with this type of offering.
Thanks, everyone. So I recognize that many of you have joined us for these sessions before and or may be familiar with Collaborative, but there are some who are joining us who might not be. So a quick overview about Collaborative Solutions. We are a finance, HR, and student cloud transformation consultancy. We've been around from the beginning, which you can see from our over 800 Workday customers, and are very proud of our 98% customer satisfaction rate. And as you are talking to them today, you can see that we have a wide variety of Workday experts with over 100 product leads. We are global and have deployed in over 125 countries, and really consider ourselves the undisputed alternative to the Big Four. And for those who don't know, we are also a Workday customer. So Workday customer 26 for HCM and Workday Financials Management customer number 3. We also have all-encompassing strategy and planning and post-go live services, which is what we're talking about today. And change management is embedded in everything that we do. And finally, I think that you'll see what we're very proud of is our Best Places to Work awards, because we know that happy employees make for happy customers. And so you get the benefits of all of that as we help you going forward. So just a reminder, we're going to go over some questions that we typically have, hearing from our customers about what these processes and services look like and how we can help you. But if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the questions section of the webinar and we will get to you. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And we're talking about how to take your Workday investment further to achieve maximum ROI. So let's start with what is a tenant analysis and plan. And the things that we're hearing is who should consider a tenant analysis and plan and what can I expect from my TAP. So we're actually going to start with Mary Ellen, a little bit on what is a tenant analysis and plan.
Sure, so there's a couple of varieties of approaches to this, but in essence, a tenant analysis and plan is an opportunity for us to have a team of Workday experts get into your tenant and take a look at a deep dive for your functional configuration. And what is kind of, I think one of the best parts about this is the effort begins with some end user experience interviews so that we're talking to not just the leadership about what they feel like could deliver better value out of Workday, but also about the things that are real challenges for the everyday end user, the super user, so that we're getting the full range of what could be better. And then we look at that against your configuration and things begin to click, right? We see we're having this challenge in the business with leveraging Workday because We have some workarounds that aren't working right. We have some security issues. We have some new functionality that hasn't been uptaken yet. We have some opportunities to really do things better in Workday. So the team goes through and they look at your configuration, they take into account your end user interviews, and they put together a really detailed recommendations document for you that talks about all the opportunities to improve things and gives an assessment on those recommendations of the level of effort involved, how complex it is, the level of risk. And if we do what we call a strategic tenant analysis, where we start with some discussion of your goals and how we measure success, we also can talk about the degree to which it's aligned to those goals and how far it will help move your needle towards the end goals that you've got for your project. So it's a really neat opportunity to kind of step back and take all the noise that you're hearing about what might be a challenge in Workday today and put a plan in place for how to really go about actionably correcting it, and think about not just fixing what you have today, but where you want to go in the future with your new functionality.
Great, thanks, Mary Ellen. Caitlin, do you have anything to add to that from an engagement manager perspective of what it is and what customers can expect?
Yeah, sure. So in my experience, a lot of customers opt for a tenant assessment. There's a few different reasons. The biggest one that I've seen is, and the biggest feedback that I've gotten from customers is, we don't know what we don't know. So they want to understand, what are best practices in the industry that they're in, what are other customers utilizing. They may have been live for a number of years and just haven't had the opportunity to look at new features or uptake the new enhancements each year. So this assessment allows the opportunity for our consultants to come in, like Mary Ellen said, do that deep dive of the system, understand those pain points, and really outline what the current state of their system is and make recommendations on their future state. What functionality is not working for them today, what new functionality they can utilize. Another reason why we see a lot of customers opting for this assessment is they've had changes in their business model. Customers that may experience a lot of mergers or acquisitions may want to consider doing this assessment to understand. I've had a few customers that opted to do this to evaluate their security model and how to optimize their security if they're going into new countries or they do have additional companies that they've acquired, to how to best support that moving forward. So those are just few of the many reasons why customers can really benefit from this assessment.
Excellent, thank you. So knowing that these assessments, can be, of a great use to our customers, let's talk about a little bit about preparing for one. So what are some important steps for us to take to properly prepare ourselves? And if we're thinking about implementing a new SKU, would this be beneficial? So I think, again, we're going to start with Mary Ellen, and I think Shannon, you have some more too, but Mary Ellen, a little bit about preparation.
Sure, so I know Shannon will talk more about this, but really expectation setting is important, and making sure that when we're working with you to set the plan in place for your TAMP, we know what you want to get out of it. So there's, like I said, there's a couple different approaches that we can take to these, but we have the in-tenant and end user version that is a tenant analysis and plan, and it is often used for smaller modules, very functionally focused kind of needs. We also have a version called a strategic tenant analysis and plan, clever name, right? What we do there is we really begin with the end in mind. So in all cases, our recommendations talk about what functionality maybe you haven't used, what's broken, against best practices, what would be the better thing to be doing. The other layer that we can put in there as kind of a method of preparation is when you do the strategy piece, we begin with some leadership alignment, and we talk about how do you want to better leverage your tenant over the next, what's your time frame? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, we settle on that. And then we say, for your key stakeholders, what does success really look like if they were getting more out of Workday? So not just the end users, although clearly they're super important, but also the executive peers. If IT were getting more out of it, if the business, the CHRO, the CFO, if those levels were getting more out of it, what would really getting the value out of your Workday investment look like to them? And by doing that, we can put into place some goals. We want a system that is going to better support our business expansion needs. We want something that is going to be more flexible for helping folks work at home because we think that's the direction that we're going to go over the next several years. Those kinds of goals that we can put into place up front to prepare for the actual tenant recommendation pieces, so that then we're able to tie and say, not only are these best practices to approach something this way, but knowing what your end goal is, planning with your end in mind, we can say that these are the recommendations that are going to be most impactful in working towards those goals. So that step of preparing up front and knowing what it is that you're trying to accomplish as you evolve your tenant really makes the meat of the project, where we're going in and we're doing those recommendations, super, super.
Shannon, a little bit more?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, everything that Mary Ellen just addressed, I completely agree with. The thing that I see most with the TAMPs that we do is that probably one of the most important things that I've seen is making sure that you have the right people in the room whenever you're doing the workshop calls. It's all well and good that you have your leadership in the room. Obviously, they need to know, they probably do know some of the pain points that you're dealing with and some of the challenges, but they may not know, down to the nitty gritty of what's going on. Is your approval process really cumbersome when it comes to your onboarding or your hire? Does it go many different places and then come back and people are missing steps or things like that? A lot of times it's the people who are actually dealing in the system day to day, in and out, that they really do have the better background to be able to answer some of the questions that you'll have in our workshops. So really important to have everybody that actually is going to touch that module be a part of the preparation and also all of those workshops that we go through during the actual tenant analysis. So.
Excellent, thank you, Shannon. So I think that, one of the driving reasons that we see a lot of customers, undertake a tenant analysis and plan or really start to, have conversations about whether or not they're getting their return on investment usually has to do with adoption. So, we get questions like, what can I do to increase my user adoption? What if I haven't uptaken, the last couple of releases? How is that affecting us? So what should we do? So Alex, do you want to talk a little bit about user adoption and how we can help customers with that and what it looks like to leverage really the tenant analysis and plan to drive that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Danielle. So one of the things, or I guess a couple of the things that we've learned over the years of deploying Workday is a couple things. One is it's a system of constant evolution, right? So that's one of the reasons why we want to do a tenant analysis and plan for our customers, to help understand how has the landscape changed, both in the business world and just in your deployment, what your needs are as a customer. The other big thing we've learned directly tied to adoption is as you continue evolving, where you really get your return on investment and the value of investment that you've made in Workday is in how your users are adopting it. So your employees, your financial users, whoever's in the system, Workday is an environment that capitalizes on and prioritizes high use of the system. So one of the things that we're always thinking about within our advisory services team and our organizational change and training practice specifically is how do we make sure our customers are capitalizing on that ROI by getting their users involved? We have a few different ways that we do that. So while, as Mary Ellen and Madeline have talked about with the tenant analysis and plan, we're really looking at where are the ways that we can optimize and add to your functional Workday deployment. At the same time, we'll come in with an organizational change team and we'll take a look from an offering that we've called user adoption and reinforcement to follow the same pattern of assessing what's currently going on, what your users are thinking, how that plays into the new functionality or the existing functionality you have. We'll advise you on different techniques and different methods, recommendations that we have for how to boost your user adoption, and then we'll come in and actually address them. And we can turn the dial up or down on each of those places depending on your own resources as well. So we definitely follow that same pattern of assessing, advising, and addressing things. the couple things that we found that typically customers have done is they've been very focused on their phase one, as they should have been, because they want the system to get live and they want it to get going. And then a couple things will either happen. Either they need that extra little boost after go live just to get their users into the system that they built, or things have settled down a little bit and we need to just reboost excitement. So we'll try to target certain events in your business that really take people back into the system. We'll try to target certain benefits, and that's where the assessment comes in, of really what's in it for your users, what's in it for your employees, your managers, your accountants, whoever's using the system, that they're really going to benefit from your Workday deployment. And then that'll help draw them into the system, make the change digestible in terms of what is the system, how are they using it to their advantage, and make the changes stick if you're taking in those new functionalities, those new SKUs, anything that you've decided through your tenant analysis and plan to further adopt from a functional standpoint, we'll also want to address from an adoption standpoint. So two different arms of that, either uptaking the new functional changes or the new business changes that you've got, or just taking your existing system and trying to juice it a little bit and bring more users into it so you can capitalize and improve that ROI.
Thanks, Alex. I think as we think about, who usually benefits in this, and obviously there's a wide variety, as we've mentioned. One of the huge areas where we see people really taking advantage of this is when they have a change in business needs. And that's everything from, our compensation philosophy has changed, we have new grades, we've moved into new markets, we, are going to take, new benchmarking. How does that affect us? I think we're also hearing a lot, especially, a trend before COVID, but definitely a bigger trend since COVID. We're redesigning our job catalog and our job profiles. Again, as we've mentioned, kind of to support the remote from home, managing remote employees. We have new jobs that we didn't have before because of everything. But how do we really, take advantage of all of these business changes and make updates to our tenants? So I think, there's a bit of opportunity there as well. And Alex or Mary Ellen, do you want to address some of these?
Yeah, I can keep going and then kick it back to you, Mary Ellen, just because my camera's on. So yeah, I think, again, when we think about the changes in the business needs, that's one of the things that we look at from a user adoption perspective and from an ROI perspective to understand the new landscape that you're in. Many of our customers have been very successful in Workday, but they may have gone live a year or 2 or 3 years ago. And a lot can change in that time. As we've seen in the past 6 months, a lot can change in 6 months. So how do we use the technology in the digital landscape that you currently exist in to help move your business forward? So for me, from an adoption lens, and I'll let Mary Ellen speak to the functional lens, it starts from understanding where your people are and how they're going to react to that business change. We use a model in our change management practice called head, heart, and hands. And we want to understand from a head perspective, how are people cognitively and analytically thinking about a change? How do they, when they sit down and think logically about it, what does that actually mean? But we also know that there's an emotional aspect in the heart. And so that's where, previously when I was talking about how do we make the change sticky and how do we make it digestible? How do we also make it easier for people to understand why this change is good for them, why the new functionality you might be adopting, the new changes to the tenant you might be making are going to make sense in the new business context. And that may be that new compensation structure. It may be that you've decided to restructure your service delivery model a little bit. Any one of those changes you make to meet your business needs, we also want to see how that plays into the technology. The last part that's more in the training arm of the services we can bring to the table too is the hands part. So once people understand the changes, once they understand why they should be bought into the changes, we're also then going to talk to them about how do you actually do it. So if your managers have to use a new compensation philosophy and keep that in mind as they're processing promotions or annual merit increases or things like that, we want to help you build the tools and deliver the tools out to your audiences that they need to actually participate in those changes. So from a change standpoint, it really just follows that thread through that we've been talking about so far about analyzing, planning, and then executing on what is going to be the best situation for your organization and for your business. So from a change perspective, that's my take on it. I'll turn it over to Mary Ellen to talk about what that looks like from a functional side.
There we go. Yeah, so if you think about the number of things that can change through just the course of regular business life. If you implemented, again, let's say 2, 3, 4 years ago, even that relatively short span of time is enough time to have had business changes because your service delivery model has changed, your roles have evolved. You've got new leadership, either at an executive or kind of a middle level, who have different expectations about what Workday should be doing and how, new ideas, how we're going to approach things, how all of this should work. So those are big drivers for changing business needs. But then we also see a lot of folks, it's kind of too fast, right? You've got mergers and acquisitions going on as the Workday ecosystem grows and kind of reaches saturation. When you have mergers and you have divestitures, you have acquisitions, it's getting more and more likely that one member in that transaction, maybe both members, are going to already be Workday customers. And so we have a lot of situations where folks decide that they really need a tenant analysis, either for M&A prep. We know that this is coming. We want to understand kind of what we have to deal with in our tenant, what they have to deal with in their tenants, and how we could begin to think about fitting them together. Or we do what I like to call M&A recovery. Maybe you've rolled several populations into your tenant as you've grown over a period of acquisitions, but in each case, it was more a matter of just bringing in the data, and we didn't adjust business processes. We didn't adjust security. We didn't look at if the whole overall tone and feel of the end user experience is what you want it to be for your new unified organization. So M&A prep and M&A recovery are both big things that we see people being interested in tenant analysis for. The other big one is new SKUs. We kind of had this under preparation, but it is a preparation activity before you do a new SKU, because if you are going to say your HCM first and you're going to roll in financials, or even something less dramatic, you want to put in learning and you haven't had learning before you put in this new wonderful layer of functionality, there's a lot to be gained for some customers by going back and looking at the foundation that you're going to build it on. Because we have all seen occasions when we've done these, and I think that we've got a number of customers that could attest to it, we're putting in something that is brand new state-of-the-art functionality on top of a foundation that was designed in alignment with 3 or 4 or 5 year ago's business needs, processes, security, that has not been updated and kind of optimized, fine-tuned, as the input into this next layer of functionality that sits on top of it really doesn't deliver all the promise that that new functionality has to offer. So that's another real reason, if you think about your changing business needs, that it could be environmental, internal or external, and it could be to do with the plans that you have for the future and making sure that your foundation is solid before you add that next layer.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. I think about the M&A work that we've been doing, and even on the divestiture side, we've been, lucky enough to work with some customers who were the divested organization and started with a TA&P so that they really understood what they inherited, right, from the organization when they were split off. So definitely a lot of changing business needs, again, changing business needs that are, normal courses of business, right, that we see before, but obviously a lot of changing business needs going through now as a result of COVID. So a lot of interest in, helping organizations understand what they have and how they can best leverage it. I know we've talked a little bit about security just natively through what we've been talking about. Obviously, we talked about acquisition, and that, security models also change over time. What made sense maybe before you were, a US only and you're looking to expand globally, maybe you've gone through that merger and acquisition, or just, your infrastructure and your security strategy overall as an organization has changed. So Madeline, can you talk a little bit about security here?
Sure, thanks Danielle. So security is a little bit of its own special animal, and we wanted to make sure that we talked about this. Most of what we've talked about so far is what I would call a vertical assessment. So we're looking at a particular functional area or set of functional areas, and we're assessing every aspect of that. We're looking at the tenanted data, we're looking at the various drop downs, the business processes, and all of the functionality in that area. Sometimes we have customers who want a little bit different target. So they know, for example, that their biggest pain point is something like security, which is horizontal, and they want to look across the entire tenant. They're not really worried about their job posting business process, for example, in recruiting. What they want to look at is across the entire tenant, every SKU that they have turned on, and they want to look at all of the security and how is that all functioning together. There's a lot of reasons for this, and some of them we've already talked about. Maybe over time you added new SKUs and you just added security in those particular areas and didn't have the time or the opportunity to look holistically at security. Another real key driving factor for wanting to do this is if you're part of a divestiture and you've inherited the security model from a larger organization and maybe it's over-engineered for your needs. So what we do in that case is we come in and we look at all of the security roles, all of the security groups, and really help you to understand what each of them does, whether they're actually tied to the most effective organization, because sometimes we see that as you evolve and grow, maybe now your needs have changed and you would have been better off attaching that particular role to the location hierarchy than the supervisory org. So lots of assessment there, understanding how the roles are being used, how frequently they're used in the tenant, and where there's overlap and maybe some opportunity to consolidate roles and simplify. So generally, when we take this look at your tenant, the goal is simplification, and it's also documentation and understanding of what is there. So lots of things we can do to help there. It's also kind of common for us to do this type of assessment in the event that you've had some turnover in your organization and you've got some new folks managing security. Maybe the departing employee only gave you 2 weeks notice and the new folks are not exactly sure what's going on and they really need that extra knowledge transfer and understanding of what's happening in order to feel comfortable. So that one is a little bit special, but definitely something that's pretty common. Back to you, Danielle.
Thanks, Madeline. I think we've definitely seen a lot of changes and desires to update security models, and I think it even relates to the next question as we think about other things. We think about the support model is changing. As a lot of organizations deploy Workday, one of the reasons they deploy it is to improve their service delivery model. But again, not everybody has the opportunity to do that concurrent with their Workday implementation. So they might have said, okay, we're focusing more on getting Workday implemented, and we're going to focus on making iterative changes to our service delivery model after we go live. So if the support model is changing, that might be one area. Obviously, are we following best practices? Again, depending on the reasons and the timeline that you had for going live, you might not have been able to uptake all the best practices at the time because it was more important to get live before something was deprecated and you kind of moved over existing as is processes. So I don't know, last, if Mary Ellen, there's anything else you want to add to this. Obviously it follows a lot of the conversations we've already been having, but I do think these are some key areas where we've seen customers reach out to us and take advantage of the tenant analysis and plan.
I think that's right. We have touched on a lot of these as we've gone over some of the others. I think we've talked about service delivery model. We've talked about the changing in roles. The one that we maybe haven't touched on so much there is best practices for my business. When we do the recommendations piece, that is always one of those things that our team is looking at is we have exposure as we deal with our base of customers to a really wide variety of solutions to problems. How have other customers tackled this? And so while we don't name drop, obviously we're very careful about everybody's security and privacy, but we do have exposure to a lot of ways to solve problems. So when we hear these challenges, it gives us a really great opportunity to be able to say, well, in retail, we've seen this is how people handle this particular challenge, or we've seen other healthcare customers take this approach to something, or this is something that's kind of unique with unions for commercial. And so we don't really have this in other areas, but we have some customers who tackled it this way. So it's a great opportunity to tap into some of that knowledge around how other customers have handled things from not just the customer perspective, but folks who have actually seen it in the tenant and can chat with other folks who have seen it in the tenant and bounce ideas off. When we build these recommendations, you might have a team that is only 3 or 4 folks actually working on your project, but they actually draw from our product leads, the other members on their teams, and they chat about it. Again, without using customer names, they say, hey, I've got this issue. The customer's looking to try and tackle this problem. What have you guys seen people do? And so it's a really neat way to be able to collect a lot of insights that can tackle a whole bunch of problems all in one opportunity for improvement. And then when you exit the end of the project with an action plan in place that says, based on what it is that we want to accomplish and where we want to go, this is our roadmap to get there. I think it's a unique opportunity to see, here's our chance to step back, pull up, look at best practices, what's the right fit for our type of organization, our type of need, based on people who have seen it, right? We have seen a thing or two as we've looked at a lot of these tenants. And I think that is one of the things that is just neatest about the TAMP offering. It's tenant analysis and plan, right? We do both. We go in there, we look at the situation, we have access to best practices, to a ton of folks who can help us with these recommendations internally. And the team comes up with some really good plans that customers can execute, either in whole projects and say, I want to do all of these together at the same time, or do them piecemeal through maybe lean on tickets or something like that. But some things even can be undertaken by the customer side. So they look at it and they say, this is what it takes to make these changes a reality. And then it opens up the door to think about internal bandwidth, conversations. If you're a collaborative customer already, a little tongue-tied there, you want to client partner and think about what the roadmap is for actually moving through some of these. Maybe it's not going to be one project, maybe it's got to be 3 or 4 to meet your budget or your timeline. But it's that opportunity to say, here is our chance to kind of clean out the closet, dust it all off, and start fresh with a new approach to the way we're our tenants and really get the value out of that Workday implementation that you've done.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. So just a reminder that we do have questions open. I've seen, I think one come in and we were able to actually already address it so far. So if anybody has any other questions, would love for you to share them. I think that, the thing we really want to take away from all of this is just, there's opportunities to really, leverage collaborative to help understand, what's going on in your tenant and work with you to understand where you want to take it and give you a plan for how to get there. And I think, Mary Ellen, summarized it great in that, it could be that, collaborative helps you make the changes. It could be that the changes can be made by your internal teams. Maybe they're made all at once, or maybe they're made, in a succession. We understand that there are budgetary concerns, timeline concerns, priority concerns that need to really drive how this all gets actually executed within the tenant. But we're here to be your partner to make sure, you actually achieve the ROI that you've set forth for your system. So with that, I don't actually see any other questions coming in. So I do want to remind everybody that you will get a copy of our Q&A here, as well as opportunity to view this later or to share this with your colleagues. And if you have any follow-up questions that you just didn't think of while we were here, but they come up later, please feel free to email us at digitaltransformation@collaborativesolutions.com. Thank you.